Welcome to our first season of the podcast, Grow from Darkness. We are your hosts, Amanda Blackwood.
And Chrysanthi Dokos from Coast to Coast. As some of our listeners know, we're both survivors of complex trauma, and it's our mission to help others experiencing similar issues.
This season, we're going to be digging into trauma reactions, their long term consequences, and how we fight back to live our best lives. Let's talk about denial. So there's the basic 5 stages of trauma that we all go through. The first one is denial. The second one is anger. The third one is bargaining. The fourth one is depression. And the fifth one is acceptance. That's actually why I thought denial would be a great place to start, as a lot of people who've been through terrible things still have a hard time accepting that. It's kind of the first step of getting through it and moving beyond it.
Yeah, it is the first step. And for a lot of people, and I'm one of them, denial is one of the hardest to get through at times.
Yeah. And it's funny because with these different stages, denial, of course, being the first one, they're not like steps that you would climb to go from one floor to another in your home. These are things that are going to be bouncing around in the same room as your head for, however long it takes. Sometimes you can get all the way down to the fourth step of depression and bounce all the way back to denial. And it's not a fluid thing. It's definitely very static and can move around a lot.
That is so true. A lot of the research supports what you've just said, and having my own lived experience, I can totally agree with everything you've just described, Amanda. Denial is hard, and going through those various stages of the trauma responses is challenging, especially if you're going through that denial and not accepting that you've experienced some sort of really traumatic situation that has impacted on your well-being.
Right. It can be a scary place to be too. I mean, especially somebody who's about to have that denial breakthrough. What a scary spot to be in, because you're starting to come to terms with it in the back of your mind. You're starting to recognize that something happened, but you're not ready yet to admit that it happened. And sometimes saying it out loud is that moment of breakthrough where you break from being in denial to being this person who's now recognizing, hey, I have lived through something really horrible. Now, what do I do with it?
I suppose it's really important to understand that it's a coping mechanism.
Right.
It really is. So in some ways, denial is actually a very helpful thing. In other ways, it can be quite a harmful thing. So if you've managed to get to that acceptance that, yes, I have experienced something, that's when the healing can start. That's when you can actually get support from, professionals around you and friends and so forth, or even doing self-help stuff like journaling and meditating. But
right.
Being in that first part of using denial as a coping mechanism when something really, really severely traumatic has happened, that's the brain's way of self-protection, because it's just too much for you to actually deal with. And that's why we go through that process of denial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can think of several different times in my personal life where I was in denial over certain things that happened. There was abuse that happened when I was 4 that I was in denial and completely forgot existed at all until I was 26 years old and sitting on a friend's couch. And that kind of denial from when I was 4 years old was helpful to me, because as a 4-year-old child, I didn't know how to process that kind of stuff. I didn't know what to do with that. And my brain recognized that. So it threw me into this moment of this space of being in denial so that I could still function and still survive in this abusive household where this same trauma continued to happen.
It's incredible how amazing the brain is. It does incredible things to protect us from our reality and help us keep going. It's not just a coping mechanism, but a survival mechanism. Because how do you deal with it at 4 years of age? You know, what tools do you have? You don't. You absolutely don't have those tools at 4 years of age. So our brains are actually very, very clever in helping us to to go through that self-preservation process until A, we're ready to deal with it, or B, we just have a complete breakdown at some point in our lives. And that's when that information sort of rears its head and we can deal with it. I had
Yeah.
a similar situation. I didn't know that I had been sexually abused as a child, and I was going through therapy around another situation. And we decided to do EMDR to help me process those emotions. So, you know, I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit later in terms of EMDR. But like while we were going through it, I actually had my suppressed memories coming back. And I found it shocking just at that time. So I was already dealing with the trauma for the therapy, and then this other trauma came up, and it just threw my healing process. But looking back on it, because it came up, I've actually been able to heal in so many other ways that I wouldn't have done had that memory not come back.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it was for me when I was 4. Right? It was sexual abuse as a 4-year-old child. I didn't remember that for most of my life. And it wasn't EMDR. I did do EMDR later on, which is incredible. And it was so helpful. That was where most of my big breakthroughs came through. But
Mhm.
when I was 26 and sitting on a friend's couch, there were certain circumstances. I don't want to go into too many details, but there were circumstances in place that mimicked what it was that I had seen and experienced when I was 4 years old. And
Mm.
that's what sparked it, which EMDR, that's kind of what it does. It's an association. Like you said, we'll get into that here in a little bit, but that association of familiarity is what triggered the memories for me. And I was an absolute wreck. I
Yeah.
had no idea what was going on or why I was remembering this or if this was even a real memory.
Mm. Mm.
And looking back on it, I remember trying to reach out to my family. I still had a relationship with my parents at that time, and trying to reach out to them and trying to talk to them about it, and being called a liar because they said, "You never said anything about it when you were 4, so we don't believe you now." But that's not the way the brain works.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And in fact, you've raised quite an interesting point. If I could just digress slightly, um, the denial of those people around us is actually another traumatic experience.
Yes. Yeah. I actually interviewed somebody on my other podcast just recently. She's got an organization called The Second Wound. Her episode's going to be coming up, I think, the second Friday in
Hmm.
March.
Hmm.
Um, but she is just absolutely fascinating. And she has spent her entire life digging into what the second wound is and e- exploring how damaging it is for families to then take the traumatized person and victimize them further by denying it ever happened, by making fun of them, by making up rumors and lies, by filling in the blanks,
Mm.
all kinds of stuff because they themselves are in denial.
Mm.
And I can absolutely, you know, say from experience that I do believe what destroyed my relationship with my mother and why she's so venomous towards me still
Mm.
is that she cannot uh, address the fact in her brain that I had something happen to me when I was 4 years old that she was powerless to prevent.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's heartbreaking really because it does destroy families. I recently, before my dad died, he died about a year ago now. In the previous years before he passed, I was coming to terms with a really horrific sexual assault that occurred to me in my early 20s, and I needed to talk about it because I'd suppressed it for over 30 odd years. And I was trying to deal with it and come to terms with it. And I wanted to reach out to Dad and talk to him about it. And I remember sitting at his kitchen table and, trying to tell him. And he just stood up, turned his back to me, put his hands down as if to say no, and basically said, I don't want to hear this.
Wow.
Don't talk about this to me. And that for me, that really just emphasized to me just how disconnected he and I were, that
Yeah.
we were never going to have that intimate father-daughter relationship that I desperately wanted and he was unable to give me. And that replayed in my mind, that incident replayed in my mind for months and months, and actually a number of years, and totally destroyed my relationship with him in the end. And I struggled when he was dying to actually be there for him, because I just, this specific thing, this denial of my horrific experience in my youth, I struggled with myself. And then to have a significant person in my life to deny it, like you, Amanda, it's just the most heartbreaking and devastating thing you can experience, compounding the trauma that you've experienced through the incident itself.
Right. And they're wanting to deny it. Often, from what I understand, I'm not alone in this. A lot of people start to question themselves too. Did this happen? You know, are they right? Am I making it up? Is this some nightmare that I invented? I have a
Mm,
very dear friend who had something very traumatic happen when she was, I think she said like 10 years old or something, and when she ran home, everybody in her family kept on, and the police and everybody kept telling her that she'd made it up and that it wasn't real. And she doubted herself
mm,
on this event until she was in her 40s. And finally she's
mm.
like, I think this really happened. I don't think I'm crazy. But
No,
it took her 30 years to be able to come to terms with it. And she still occasionally doubts herself on it. I mean, it's awful. It's a type of gaslighting.
it's an absolute type of gaslighting. Yes, yes. And as we've spoken about before, gaslighting in and of itself is quite a traumatic experience for people who have been victims of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I mean, you grew up with narcissistic abuse, and there's a lot of gaslighting involved in that too.
Mm, mm. There certainly is.
I mean, that's a huge part of it. The and are you aware of where gaslighting gets its name from?
Yeah, isn't
Oh
it
my
a
gosh, isn't
1940s film?
yes. Oh, it was such an incredible film that just sent shivers up and down my spine. But a lot of people don't know where the term comes from. And for the sidekicks of the narcissist, they're called what?
Flying
Flying
monkeys.
monkeys. Also from a very old film from The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Have
So
you seen that film? Well, it was actually called
Gaslight
Gaslight, wasn't it?
with Ingrid Bergman. Oh, it's fantastic. I watched it before narcissistic abuse was, before it was something that was even really talked about. I watched that movie back in, I want to say, the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I love that movie. I'm a huge fan of that era anyway, so
I know
my
you are.
TV was always kind of stuck on that channel. But I just think it's fascinating that we were portraying this kind of abuse before it had a terminology
Yeah.
in cinema. And if we start going back into classic literature, a lot of this abuse is in the classic literature too.
Yeah.
It's been around forever. Why are we just now getting around to naming it and then naming it after the things that already portrayed it?
Mm, mm. It is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, yeah, humanity's a funny thing. It's a funny thing. I don't know. I suppose, it was suppressing it in those days as well, not wanting to accept that this was, and actually, I'm wondering whether a lot of it has to do with the patriarchy, the whole gender stuff.
It might be, but I've known so many men that have been through this kind of stuff too, being gaslight by others, either, men that they know, men that they work with, or men being gaslit by the women that they're married to or they're in relationships with.
Yeah, that's true, actually. That's
Yeah.
true. I think it's human behavior. I
Yeah.
think it's human
Yeah.
behavior. Oh, can you hear that magpie in the background?
I did hear that. I was wondering what that
Yeah.
was. It's lovely.
Yeah. It's a black and white bird that we have here in Australia, and it's indigenous to Australia. And it's got the most beautiful, beautiful singing voice. And symbolically, it's the messenger bird.
Oh.
So, seeing as we're sitting here recording this podcast, sending out this message about denial, I think is quite profound.
I think he came at exactly the right moment.
He did. He did. Anyway, we digress. I'm really good at that.
It's
Um,
fun.
yeah. But I just want to go back to the idea of how denial can actually be a really good thing.
Yes. Yeah. It is
Um,
handy.
yeah. Yeah. Because particularly after a significant traumatic experience, our bodies and our brains need time to actually process what's taken place at that subconscious level, because it's too hard for our conscious brain to be dealing with, daily life, as well as having had this huge traumatic experience, and coping with that reality at the same time. So I think it's important that we make that distinction for people who are listening, that initially denial is not just a coping mechanism, but it can actually be a really adaptive coping mechanism.
Right. Absolutely. It buys you some time so that you can breathe after something really traumatic has happened. Um, and from the research that I've looked up, it can be either conscious or subconscious. You might not realize that you are going through trauma denial, or it might be a conscious choice to stay in trauma denial because you're not ready to deal with it. You're not ready to have this front and center in your life. You want to keep burying it and hiding from it. But this is it's all a very normal part of experiencing trauma.
It is. It is. And it's important in the healing process that at some point we do face it, because otherwise it just sits there and sits there and sits there. And as we spoke in our first episode, we talked about how trauma sort of actually gets into our cells in our bodies, and then impacts on us, through autoimmune disorders and other illnesses. So if we continue to deny something and not deal with it, we're going to be holding onto that in our bodies as well, not just our minds, until we do deal with it.
Right. And there's so many things that can happen in the long-term consequences too. There's if you keep denying even after your brain is telling you it's okay, we can deal with this now, and you keep denying it, you can go through all kinds of stuff. It can eventually cause disassociation, which, if you've heard of disassociation, dissociative identity disorder,
Mm,
it used to be known as multiple personality disorder.
mm, mm.
You can start to learn to cope in different ways. It could be really confusing. You get disconnected from yourself and from the world around you. You can take on several personalities. Um, Disassociation isn't always multiple personalities, which is why that has kind of changed. Um, but it can lead to a bunch of different things. Feeling detached from your body. Um, you can feel like you're detached from everything and everyone around you. You can, I've had this happen where you drive 12 miles in one direction and not remember doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, everything you've just described in terms of dissociation, except for the multiple personality thing, unless I'm not aware of it, I've experienced.
Well, see, with the
Um,
multiple personalities, you wouldn't know.
I know there could be all sorts of things that I'm not aware of. But certainly feeling that sense of detachment from myself and from others. There was quite a long period in my life where I was really, really detached. It was almost like I was observing myself from a height above me and looking
Right.
down and watching me do things physically and interact with people, but I wasn't actually there. I wasn't present
Yep.
in that full sense, you know?
That is absolutely a dissociation.
Mm,
That's probably the most common way that it is described, although not the most common way that it is experienced.
mm, mm, mm.
It's just fascinating. It's like an out of body experience.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
really is. And I think I spent a number of years like that, particularly after that incident I told you about just before about the sexual assault. I think for a number of years I was like that. Um, just, yeah,
Well, it's safer.
I was existing really rather than living.
Right. And it's safer for you. You know, at the time, you believe that this is what needs to happen because you are at the precipice of being injured. And if you are not present in your body, that injury will not hurt you. This
Mm,
is what your brain is telling you because
mm,
it's been so long that you've been in this form of denial.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're not ready to be that person. That person is somebody else. That person is over there.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's very painful to actually relive it or deal with it, confront it, um, because it sort of re-traumatizes us. But in actual fact, going through that journey of confronting it, that's when the healing starts to happen. That's when we can actually be present in each moment and actually live a life that is self-actualized, that is um, you know, above just surviving and
Right.
existing. It's actually really, really living and finding joy in simple moments like the magpie coming past and me noticing that.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, and there's so many long-term consequences that people definitely don't want to have to deal with when it comes time to come out of the denial. And emotional numbness is one of them. The fact
Mm,
that you can take joy out of hearing your magpie and having it come and visit. This is huge. A lot of people who remain in the denial stage for a long period of time go through emotional numbness and they don't feel anything because they're
mm,
afraid of feeling something.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you
Yeah.
ever heard of anosognosia?
No, it's
No.
no, I don't
It
think I have.
basically it basically means lack of insight.
Ah.
And this is another one of the long-term consequences of somebody in denial.
Mhm.
They have an impaired ability to understand or to perceive an illness. So they try to rationalize or cover up whatever symptoms they're feeling, whether this is
Mhm.
physical, mental, emotional, whatever it is. In some cases, an anosognosia can be fatal. It's
Yeah,
really, really terrifying.
yeah.
So, yeah, that's probably the worst of the long-term consequences from remaining in denial when your brain is saying it's okay now. We can
Mm,
deal with this now.
mm, mm.
Yeah, and I'm glad you didn't get to that point. Emotional numbness, emotional blunting, all that stuff. Sounds like you've been through all of that.
I have, and it's so lovely to be able to just sit back and talk about it, um, and not feel the pain. I'm attached to it, but I'm not feeling it because I've been able to go through that process and heal.
Right.
Yeah.
It's incredible being able to come out the other side of that.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. You know, I for a long time I was, I suppose I could have described myself as a bit of a hermit. You know, home was my safe space, and but even at home, I used to sort of feel edgy and hypervigilant, and at the same time as being emotionally blunted and numb, which is such an irony. But that's how trauma works. Um, and now I'm just loving going out and doing things on my own. I don't know if you've noticed on my Facebook pages, you know, like I took myself out the other night and
You went
um,
surfing.
I know, I know.
Ah, I
And then
was
the
so
same night I
proud
went
of
to a
you.
jazz thing. It's just been so much fun, you know, getting to
Yeah.
know myself again. And for people who are trauma survivors, that's just one of the beauties of healing, is that you get to have all these experiences that you've shut yourself off from, but truly experience them. You know, like you mentioned the surfing. What I loved about the surfing was being in the water and feeling the salt on my face and
Yeah.
tasting it in my mouth. And the water was so icy cold, but I felt that icy cold. And there was the beach was full of people, and I was just joyful that everybody was out having a fun time, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas in the past, if I'd seen all those people, I could have been quite negative about it and maybe jealous and, you know, why aren't I here with my friends and family? And, you know, why am I here on my own? But I just reveled of being on my own. It was so
Yeah.
cool.
Yep, absolutely. And that's sloughing off the codependency and the people pleasing and getting rid of all of these things that are brought up from trauma and
Mm,
reinventing yourself as well as exploring and figuring out who you are. Some of my best moments ever um, goes back to your surfing. When I lived in LA for 14 years, I learned how to surf. Um, I guess, what was that? 8 years into my time there,
mhm,
and going out paddling out, I had a 9 foot 6 inch longboard. I'd paddle out past the last wave, and I wouldn't even worry about surfing back in. I would just sit there on the water in my wetsuit because the water's freezing cold, uh,
mhm,
and just think. And I would hear the waves crashing back behind me. And every now and then I
mm,
wouldn't even think, I would just exist. And it was
yeah.
this beautiful moment of peace and tranquility and not having anybody else around me. All of my anxiety just washed away with the waves.
Mm, mhm. That is, you're taking me back to Saturday when I was out on the water. It was exactly like that. And I suppose the beauty of this podcast and us chatting is to show people who are experiencing trauma symptoms that it is so possible to heal from it and find joy back in our lives.
And it's such a beautiful thing when we do.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
it sure is.
All
I'm
right. It's,
wondering whether on that note we could end today. What do you think, Amanda?
I think you've pretty much nailed it there. Yeah, I think you're right. It's just what a beautiful adventure.
Yeah. So what are we doing next time? I can't remember.
Well, I was thinking we might take it down to the second of the trauma stages, which would be anger. Um, and just kind of delving into how many different forms that can take, what that
Mm,
looks like.
mm. I think that's a great plan. And gee, I've got so many examples of anger that I can share.
I think so many of us do. Oh,
Oh
yeah. And
dear.
there's so many trauma responses that come from that too. And we'll touch on some of those, I'm sure, next week or next episode, but we'll probably dig into those a lot more later on too.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, this we're really just touching the surface in those first few weeks. We're just really introducing everything for our listeners because it's such a huge topic and we're learning so much more, you know, almost on a daily basis with all the research that's been going on in recent years.
Yeah. I actually just a couple of days ago released my very first in the uh, book series that I'm writing, and this one's about the trauma reactions. So a lot of this is research that I've had to do just to be able to write this first book out of the series. There's so much information now that's available everywhere on the internet. It's handy, but it's also really informative to just kind of look it up and see, where do I stand on all of this? How
Mm,
does my life fit?
mm. Well, yeah, I did see that you've just released that. Congratulations, by the way. I'm
Thank
sure a
you.
lot of people are going to be able to get so much out of that. So,
And speaking of book releases, I think you've got some news.
oh yes, I know. I hit send on that enter button on my computer the other day, and my manuscript has now gone to print layout. It's so exciting. Um, yeah, so that my book getting out, Claim Your Life After Narcissistic Abuse, is coming out within the next couple of months. And watch this space.
That is awesome. I'm so excited. I can't wait to get my first copy because I'm going to have more than one. I want an early release, and then I'm going to get a signed copy too.
Yes, yes, yes. That's right. All right, my lovely. Well, great to talk with you today, and look forward to talking about anger next time.
Yeah, it's a strange sentence to say, but me too. You can find out more about Growth from Darkness through the website www.growthfromdarkness.com. You can also learn more through the Facebook page, which can be found at facebook.com/growth from darkness. Thank you.